I felt the entire time that we were teaching college that on the one hand, it was marvelous what we were able to accomplish. We found lots and lots of students who were very reachable, and we reached a great many. Yep. On the other hand, it was an uphill battle at the point you get to college because so much damage had been done earlier.
This is true.
And that the right place to intervene is, in grade school, right? The system that damages people as they advance through the supposed educational environment is, it robs you of developmental capacity. And it may be more fun to teach college in a sense because the material is richer, but it's the wrong place to save people, right? The system is broken early on, and what you have is a cascading failure that at the point that you get to college has people who are increasingly empowered and have been betrayed by those who told them how you figure out what's true.
No, and it's part of why what's happening in K-12 is so important. And the obvious things around trans ideology, which actually threaten to and do physical irreparable damage to children when it's taken to its now apparently accepted medical extent, is just it's a perfect encapsulation of the set of risks. But even absent that, using children as tools in your own ideological battle, as opposed to giving children experience, real physical experience of the real physical world, and the tools to do the relatively few things when they're very young that they really will need to do, like read and write and do some math. And then get them outside gardening and get them outside playing sports and have them make art and have them consider patterns and try to figure out what it is that could possibly be causing those patterns. And when they propose ideas that, if they're 5, maybe you don't call it a hypothesis, but maybe you do. We certainly did with our kids. When they're 10, you do. And you reveal to them how deeply personally they feel about any hypothesis they come up with, even if it's something they didn't even know existed 10 minutes ago. And it's that sort of, once you can begin to reveal to people how much they've taken on a belief, even one that they didn't even know existed a few minutes ago, then you can be able to separate for them the emotional sense of I will die if you don't do this for me, as opposed to maybe that's just not true, and that's okay. So let's move on.
That's great, but it's worse than that. I'm sorry. I know that's inappropriate here because what you've just described is an excellent way of educating people, but the problem, many of our colleagues who are comparatively awake to the problem in the university system see the perverse incentives and they see the meltdown and they think, fix the perverse incentives, solve the meltdown. They don't understand there aren't enough people who are capable of doing what you've just outlined, right? If you were to solve it's tenure, right? Tenure proves this point.
Okay, but I was talking about college and you said, no, we have to talk about K-12, and now you're talking about college again. So you wanted to talk about the elementary school kids.
Well,
there's no tenure there.
It's the same point. The point is, look at what tenure proves about fix the incentives, right? A professor who has immunity from their colleagues' dirty looks and negative opinions is a professor for whom the incentive structure has been fixed. And they don't behave courageously because they've been developmentally trained not to. So what we have is a system that begins miseducating people in grade school. Those people mature through the ranks. Then they ultimately become professors. And
I think that actually there's plenty of elementary school teachers and people who want to be elementary school teachers who can do what I said.
No, you could do that, but how long would it take you to solve the problem so that it cascaded up and you had a system of people in college who were actually several generations? It takes several generations.
At least a generation. Why would it take several? Why does it inherently take several?
Because it has to spread. Because you say there are enough people. I don't think there are enough people to staff every classroom for every grade school. there are enough people that you might have a couple of them in every school, and those people might be able to illustrate by example what can be done, and it might catch on slowly, but it's going to take a long time for a good set of incentives to pervade the system enough that we're actually educating people rather than anti-educating people, which is what we're currently doing. So anyway, I think you and I are making different points. My point is we have a 4-alarm fire because there's no fix for the one that I'm talking about.
And what can you describe? I feel like you've made two different points,
okay,
and I don't know what fix you're talking about now.
The fix of civilization in which we are training people to actually think independently enough to spot wrong ideas and see around them. What we have is a population that has become compliant. At best, people have become reflexively skeptical of what they're being told is true, but they don't know how to find...
I would say cynical then. Reflexively skeptical.
Yeah, I agree with you. Cynical is the right term. Mm-hmm. But, you can't live in a society in which you've got a bunch of people who believe the rabid dogma no matter what it says and how obviously wrong it is, and the other half of society just simply won't believe anything, right?
Well, but I mean, I think this is a different approach to education, but one that is done. I mean, maybe not in these terms exactly, but I know that there's elements of this approach in the teachings in Rudolf Steiner, right, and Waldorf, in some of the unschooling, like, and there's just I'm forgetting many of the names of the traditions at the moment, but there are a number of these, and they go up as well. There's some institutions of higher ed that actively are kind of take these low tech, high nature, high exposure to complexity. And high exposure to physical labor, honestly, approaches to educating the whole human being, to not imagining that you're just, doing the analytics, or you're just, I don't even know what else it would be, but, this concept, if we're talking about higher ed now, I think most K-12 teachers don't make this error anyway, but it's amazing the number of college faculty who basically say, the students to me are brains in jars. Like the whole rest of who they are, what it is that they are, and what informs them, and why they're here, and why they care, and what they're doing next, doesn't pertain to me. That's for student affairs. Like that's a different division of the college that matters, and that's absurd. But that does follow from some of the other confusions of modernity, or postmodernity, if you will, which imagines that you can be your body is separate from your brain, is separate from your psychology. Like all of these things can actually be separated out, and you can say, oh well, today I'm going to work out because my body needs a workout. It's like, no, that's going to help everything. Like, everything that you do is affecting everything that you are. And this reductionist approach to education, to science, to understanding who we are in the universe, everything it's not just degrading, but it makes no sense. It's totally incoherent. And I think the modern educational approach of saying today, right now, children, what we're doing is we're learning to write. Right now, children, what we're learning is how to garden. And, there will be some of those things, like actually you should know your times tables, right? But in general, the more holistic the experience, and the more you can be called on at any moment to pull something that you know from some domain that you don't think you're working on right now, the more integrated all of your understanding about the universe is going to be, and the more likely you are going to be able to be competent to solve problems under normal conditions, and also in an emergency. And that's what we saw as a failure for people to think in the emergency that was this last 3 years.
Yeah, it's a obvious demonstration of the absence of the capacity to think, which is what we claim we are inducing in students. And I have not heard any professor say students are effectively brains in jars, but I certainly have heard them put
I had two colleagues who said that to me.
I believe it. I just didn't hear it. What I heard was the beautified version of that. It doesn't sound quite so despicable, right? It's the repackaged version, which is life of the mind, right? The idea that we are the academics and we have actually discovered that the richness of life is what takes place in your mind, and it is disconnected from the world, and you have to participate in the world to an extent, but it's to be minimized, because really what the experience is the extraction of high-minded ideas from
This
books.
is like I'm sorry, like this is the ivory tower, right? This is white collar versus blue collar.
Yep.
This is, hating on the body and anyone who does work with their body. And, meanwhile, these people are presumably thinking of themselves, many of them like, oh, I'm also a foodie. I care very much about, like, you don't know anything. These people often don't know anything because they are so disconnected. I'm sorry. I hate this so much.
I detest it equally.
Yes.
But, I hate to keep returning us here, but we've got a particular kind of failure that we have now seen again and again. And it looks like this. You've got a system that operates on momentum.
Yeah.
You disrupt it in a fundamental way because you're a corrupt son of a bitch and you want the system to take your particular idea and propagate it because it will make you wealthy or whatever. Okay? So you disrupt the ability of the system to spot garbage because you want to distribute your particular kind of garbage through that system. And then...
Hold on, that sounded a little bit too cynical. I think most people don't start by saying, I'm going to produce garbage and I'm going to make sure the system likes my garbage. They start by producing something and it's good. And then they produce another thing and it's not as good. And I think, well, but it's the thing I just spent a year on and it needs to get accepted. And so, it's not, the goal isn't let's get the system to accept garbage.
No. I'm talking about something different. I agree with you that what you're talking about is real and that most people start out intending to do good work and they turn into counterproductive automatons through a developmental process. Right. I'm talking about something like pharma, which discovers that not only does it need for scientists to say untrue things on its behalf, but that it can become expert at refining what it is that the scientists will on cue say in order to get the products of pharma consumed, and it becomes a puppeteer, right? So that is diabolical, whatever the internal conversations of pharma sound like.
Impressive puppeteer.
It's a virtuoso, right? It plays the university and
the public,
basically the hospitals,
granting agencies, everything.
All of these
medicine.
things. It plays them like an orchestra.
Yeah.
But so you figured, let's say that there's some pharma thing which needs its message broadcast through people wearing the right kind of garb with the right kinds of degrees and the right kinds of venues.
And the right accents and the right
all of the proper, the props and the settings and everything.
Yeah.
So it disrupts the ability of the university to figure out what's true, because if the university starts looking at what it's supposed to be saying on behalf of pharma and says, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't even make sense because here are 17 different reasons that we should be skeptical of it,
right.
That will be bad. So it gets good at playing the university and everything connected to it like an instrument. And it does not result in a catastrophe right away, right? The university stopped thinking. We don't know exactly when that happened, but it did. And the point is, it's generations later when you notice, right? When the thing is so bad that you can now talk about in public, hey, that is an institution that has completely collapsed, even though if you stood in the center of any campus, it would still look like a functioning university, right? You still see the professors, you see the students, you see the books, you see everything that you would expect to see is there, except for the style of thinking that results in insight, right? So what is the name?
It's the hardest thing to quantify, though.
Right. And which is why we were in denial, and you and I were not in denial. We were complaining about the failure of those institutions, though maybe we were not complaining at the correct level given the degree of failure.
But we saw it.
But we saw it.
Yeah.
But what's the name for the thing when you have a perverse incentive that causes you to wreck the competence of an institution that then continues to do its job because it doesn't require competence for some period of time, and then you notice way down the road, hey, the inspectors of this kind of engineering stopped checking anything. I mean, we saw it in the financial crisis with the ratings agencies. The ratings agencies were giving ratings that had nothing to do with the quality of the financial instrument, right? So it's like, oh, the ratings agency.
This is critically important, and I don't know that has a name. I want to hear about it if it does. There's an institution that is important, if not perhaps even necessary, to the functioning of a society as we understand it. It gets captured, broken, something. But it continues on because it's already got momentum, inertia.
Yep.
And it is not noticed. It is a shell of itself. It is perhaps even in this case, in many cases, doing the opposite of what it's supposed to do, of what it is continuing to claim to do. And it continues on for some time. And honestly, because it's still going by the same name, and because the thing that it was supposed to be doing is a little hard to track, and because there is some other, in this case, there is some other entity out there that wants no one to notice. Do not look at the man behind the curtain. It just continues on. And I mean, I think we're seeing this all over.
We are seeing it all over. And 2 points. One, our current president is a very special version of this, right? It is now totally obvious that the person inhabiting the office is actually an unnecessary prop, right? This is an unnecessary prop, and, the country still hobbles along, right? Yeah. Who is that? Who's really in charge, right? What does this mean? So anyway, we got some style of problem where the thing moves along based on momentum. Ultimately, a crisis emerges that reveals how feeble it has become, at which point people become serious about fixing it. But what they don't spot is that there is no fix. At the point you've let the thing go for generations, your fix is going to take generations, and that is the disaster.
And then there will be the people who trot in and say, but we need X. And you say, yes, but that isn't X.
Yep.
But we need the institutions, but we need the media, but we need the journalism, but we need the medical fixes for the deadly diseases. Yes, but those aren't fixes, and those aren't universities, and that's not media. They're not doing journalism, they're not seeking truth, they're not curing the things they're claiming to cure. None of those things are what they seem to be. And so when you trot in saying, oh, we need those things, like, no, we need things that were once called that. But we don't have those things anymore. And the things that are pretending to be them are doing far more harm than good.
Yeah, we see it at Wikipedia. We see it at the CDC. We see it all over the place. But
we need a CDC, Brett.
That very well may be, but the people to staff a CDC are not at the CDC. I'm not saying none of them are. There are some people inside the CDC, inside the Congress. There are people everywhere who could be liberated and would start doing the job if given that opportunity, but there aren't enough of it to run these things. That's the concern, is that actually...
Not currently in the institutions, but anywhere.
Yes, or, how would you even find them, right? If they're not credentialed in the way you would expect.
So at some level, we've got a hiring problem. Like a global level, like how do you find the talent for all of the institutions that actually need to be functional, that are not functional, and match those people with those positions and give them the authority to do what needs to be done.
Right. It's a nightmare problem.
Yeah.
And I think I've spotted what I was getting at.
Mm-hmm.
There are every one of these problems where you discover an institution that has been running on momentum at the point a crisis that reveals its incapacity emerges out of nowhere, right? These are problems for which bad incentives were enough to cause the problem, and good incentives are not enough to fix it. That's the problem. It's the asymmetry. It was much easier to cause this disruption than it is to fix it. It's a basic, it's like institutional entropy. Right? You have created institutions that cannot be resurrected by reversing the things that ruined them in the first place.
Yeah, you cannot, as I've said of the universities, just scrape the woke off the top.
Right.
Not sufficient.
Won't
the rot
happen.
is far deeper than that.